Gotcha.
All right, welcome in live to Under Review. This is Steven and Cole. We're a little bit different today. I don't know why I'm pointing here. You're really right here. But this is Steven and Cole. A little bit different today. Zoom. We got derailed by some naders, as we call it down here. But we are doing it live or not live. We're recording it for the people. We still got to get us out there, Cole. We can't let it slide. We can't get a week.
We're trying to. Every step of the way. There's just so much to talk about, Steven. We were like, we can't let some weather keep us down. We got to talk about this stuff.
There's too much news. I got the fireplace. I wanted to feel at home here, like we normally have. But there's too much. We're a college football show, Phil. There's too much college football news going on right now. So why don't you tell us the latest that's going on in our home state? Why don't you tell us the latest that's going on?
It's a good thing, Steven, that the basketball team is doing what it can to distract Auburn fans from just the absolute turmoil that's going on with the football program right now. Just in the news for all the wrong reasons. So it's announced this week that Bryan Harsin is going through a little bit of a pickle with the athletic program as far as kind of the overall look. On National Signing Day this week, they had 0 signees. I know they had a lot in the early signing, but obviously none this week. They had a lot of transfers coming out this week. And obviously, of course, the news broke out about Austin Davis. He is out now as offensive coordinator for Auburn after only serving for a month, hasn't even coached a down for Auburn. And now you look at the perception around the program with Bryan Harsin. It is announced this week about possibly a little bit of a scandal going on. And we don't really know what to think of it. It's just rumors right now, Steven. We don't really know what to think about it. And that's really, that's all we can go is just based off the optics. And really what's happened with all this with Bryan Harsin is really based around optics, is how has this looked from the outside with 6 coordinators? Is it 6 or 5 coordinators now that have went out the door?
I think it's 5 coordinators. I think I saw a tweet. It was he had 6 wins and 5 coordinators.
It's hard to explain.
And of course we have what was their defensive coordinator? He went to Oklahoma State.
Derek Mason.
Yeah. So he loses both coordinators. Obviously replaces them. We talked about it a little bit on our show that we came back with about how it's more of a Boise State feel now. How he was kind of getting back to that those grounds instead of going more SEC there. Obviously, it doesn't work, like you said. Austin Davis out. Derek Mason. Not a bad thing. He's going to take a new job, so it wasn't like he's just quitting.
Right. It's not necessarily, yeah.
There's a lot.
He's coming from the NFL, so.
Right, correct. And he kind of, I don't know if you read his statement. He just said he wanted to take a break from football in general, is what it sounded like. So it was more of I didn't sound like a detriment to Harsin as much as the other things. I do want to talk about. I'm kind of connected via a friend through these Auburn message boards, and let me tell you, they're wild right now. It is the wild west up in there. There's everything happening.
If you're on Twitter and Facebook, man, Auburn social media has been going crazy this week.
It's wild.
It's been just roller coaster.
We have people taking Harsin's side. We have people saying, what are we doing? Alan Green is crazy for hiring him in the first place. We obviously have boosters. I call them the Pat Dye boosters, the older boosters kind of side, saying like they never wanted him in the first place. That's why they're trying to kind of build.
Got your mom and pop Auburn fans, right?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
They're trying to get him out. They're trying to build a case, obviously, to where they don't have to pay him, because they have to pay him $9 million a month from when they fire him. So if they fired him tomorrow, they would have to pay him $9 million a month from then. And then they also have $9 more million to pay over like the next few quarters. So it wouldn't be a $9 million check. If they fire him, it's a $9 million check a month from now without cause. That's without cause. So these old boosters are trying to build a cause here. And Cole, I just want to touch on these rumors really quick. I don't know if you've heard them all. From what I've heard. So the big one, I think, is that he has a mistress. I think that's the big one. I think that's
yeah.
I think what's being said is he hired I guess he was like a special assistant or something like that. And that's who
she was from Boise State too, correct?
I believe so. That is my understanding. I'm not too deep into message boards. I think if you go too deep there, you lose your brain a little bit.
I want to tend to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. You get some misinformation for sure. You can.
And I do want to point out before we go any further, these are all rumors. Nothing has been confirmed.
Strictly rumors. This is nothing that it's factual.
I think that it's interesting just to touch on these rumors, though, if nothing else, because the message boards, where there's smoke, there's fire. So if nothing else, at least one. There's too many rumors for at least one of them not to be true. And then, of course, I think there was.
And this would not be the first time we've seen this in college football either, and
No.
not even in the SEC in this division.
Absolutely not. I think it's
so.
So I do want to point out. I think you can always be a coach again if you have an affair. Like it's not like your end of your coaching career. Some of the other rumors, though, where he's treating players like dogs. I don't know if you saw Lee Hunter, a former 4-star defensive lineman.
Oh yes, I saw that.
Yeah,
yes.
He posts on Instagram, said that, Coach Harsin, for what he is, he's a decent enough coach, like football coach, but he's not a good person. And then
he cares a lot about winning, but just doesn't create maybe a very good environment for the players, according to Lee Hunter. Yes, I saw that.
He said he treated them like dogs, is how he stated it. But then if you look on Twitter, you have several Auburn players that are currently there.
A lot of alumni, coming to his defense.
Yeah, defending him. So, it's kind of it's a he said. You can't really take anything from that. It's one recruit that got out. He probably didn't like the way he didn't get enough playing time or something like that.
Absolutely. And you have that. You have that a lot.
Yeah. Right. And then I did hear, so I think me and you both listened somewhat to the next round. I heard them saying that there was some racist rumors going on, which I hadn't actually heard. They had just stated that there was a rumor about that. Now, I don't know what the point of that rumor, like how that came to be, but obviously I think you can coach again if you have a mistress. You can coach again. You can coach again if you are a little bit harsh on players. If you're a little tough on them, a little tough love, you're always.
Oh yeah, no, for sure.
I don't think you can ever coach again if you have racist.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. How would they be able to prove that? And that's where this all gets into, because what has happened here, Steve, if you want my honest opinion, I think that you're right. I think that Bryan Harsin has rubbed somebody in the administration, one of these players, in the wrong way. And it has just been like a web of just rumors that have come out, and people have just felt like if they didn't like him, or if they didn't like the way he was doing things, because I've also read a lot on these message boards where Bryan Harsin does not run the Auburn program like some of these past coaches, where they've been kind of soft, kind of been yes men, kind of been players coaches. Bryan Harsin's very much.
I mean that 4-star
kind of Saban-like, like I'm not going to take no crap from you. So I think that's kind of rubs people the wrong way, and so I think that's kind of how this kind of word vomit, as I would call it, has kind of just came out of people's mouths, and are trying to start some things about him. And I don't believe some of this stuff. Maybe some of it is true, but then again, maybe it all isn't true. And it's all just them trying and stir some stuff up with Bryan Harsin as he's trying to get some kind of success at Auburn. So I'm not sure.
I will say I heard from an Auburn insider today. I forget who it was. I think he just writes about Auburn for On3 Sports. He was saying that he thinks Harsin's a very competitive guy. He's not going to be a back down guy. He's going to say, hey, all this stuff is happening. Because, a lot of people have said even if he doesn't get fired, doesn't even want to stay in the situation that he's in right now. So the situation is so boiled over. There's so much news about it. There's so much talk about it. Would you even want to be in the situation? He said that Bryan Harsin to him has the personality of somebody that's going to stick around. He's going to say, look, I have this mentality. I want to win football games. I want to build something here. Fire me if you want to, but until then, I'm going to keep working, kind of thing. Which I think he does. From everything I've read and heard about him, he does kind of have that mentality. Competitive guy, really wants to build something in general. And obviously when you're building something, and Auburn has not been good, we can argue since 2013, maybe 2014, 2010, whatever you want to say. Let's say the past 7 years, they haven't really been good. Now to
6 to 8 wins, pretty much. Yeah.
To break something down and really get them to the next level, you're going to hurt some people's feelings. You're going to get in people's, bad sides. You're going to do that to build a winning program. It's whether the boosters and the higher ups are ready for that kind of renovation or not. So I honestly don't know. There's probably at least one of these rumors are true. He's probably hard on his players. He might have a mistress. I really don't know. That's just everything I wanted to kind of get that on the table. I'm kind of on Harsin's side. I think that maybe he's trying to build something here. Obviously, I think that did I go blurry? There we go. I think
camera just went out of focus on you. It's all good. Happened.
I think that if you really look at it, it's because he went on that losing streak at the end of the season. They were 6-2 at one point, and then all of a sudden they lose their next 5. That's tough. And then I think if their recruiting has not been the greatest. I mean, I think they're like 25th or something like that in recruiting. Maybe
not good.
Maybe
not where they were. I mean, not to say that's bad, but just not where Auburn is accustomed to being.
I would say it's not a pitiful recruiting class, but it's not the level that they're looking for.
No, not at all.
And you can make excuses, but it definitely hurts that you don't get a signee on signing day. And
for sure, yeah, no, especially when you have Georgia, Alabama, Texas A&M, all these other teams that are in your conference that are having such big national signing days.
Oh, 100%. The craziest thing, Harsin's not even in the States right now. He's on vacation somewhere. Like, he's not even in the United States. So I bet his phone is blowing up right now. So
I'm sure this is going to take a few weeks to mull over, I'm sure. And whether somebody gets down to the bottom of what has happened and what has transpired over the last few days, I don't know. But I'll say this, Stephen, if Bryan Harsin does remain Auburn's coach, and this season with the games that he has in front of him, this is going to be a tough year. If we thought last year was tough on Auburn, and it was at times, I mean, like you said, they got 6-2. They were actually, believe it or not, there was talk of them possibly winning the West last season. I mean, it's crazy to think about. They were one of the hottest teams in college football, and people were actually thinking that they could make a run towards getting into the Iron Bowl and maybe even getting to the SEC championship game. But now you look at their schedule, you've got road games at Alabama, at Georgia, at Ole Miss. I mean, you've got to play Penn State at home. You've got to play LSU at home and Texas A&M. Arkansas is no longer a gimme game. I mean, and all this distraction and all these expectations. And Alan Green has made it very apparent about, with that lifetime contract to Bruce Pearl, he's now higher paid than Bryan Harsin. He's higher paid than the football coach. So what he's basically saying is, I need to see something from you before you get this kind of contract, this kind of love, this kind of attention. There are Auburn fans now, they're more loyal to Bruce Pearl than they are Bryan Harsin.
And hey, I can't blame him. I can't blame him.
You can't blame him right now. But where is the, I guess what I'm asking is where does Bryan Harsin go to earn that kind of respect back? Because now that his name's been kind of thrown through the mud this week, I mean, will wins during the season kind of amend that, or is it just simply just keep your mouth shut and just keep moving? I mean,
I think time will tell. Honestly, I think Auburn was supposed to announce their new president either today or really soon, maybe Monday. And then I've message boards are telling me that it's looking like that president is going to try and bring another AD in.
Okay.
So Alan Green might have saved himself with the Bruce Pearl contract. In all honesty, he might have saved himself that 8-year deal, keeping Bruce Pearl around and securing him away from Louisville. Again, time will tell. I think Alan Green rubbed a lot of people the wrong way when he hired Harsin. When he was their fourth choice is what I've heard from their football. I think we all heard that whenever he was hired. That we said, hey, it's an out of the box hire. It's Boise State. We'll see what's going on. But yeah, I would be surprised if the new president doesn't at least try to see if there's a different person other than Alan Green out there. And then I'm assuming.
Let me ask you this. Go ahead. Let me ask you this, Stephen. I just want to know what your opinion is. If you're Bryan Harsin, would you want to kind of address the media within the next week or two? Do you think that he should, or do you think if you're him, you just kind of just lay low and just kind of just wait till spring practice starts up, just get back to football? In my opinion, unless there is something that you feel like you should directly, address, which means that there is some truth to this fire, you say nothing and you just stick to football. You let the wins speak for themselves. You get back to spring practice, do what you do best, and just get the fans focused on football. Do something that's going to get them stop focusing on what's going on here and focus what's going on the field.
Right.
And until then, I would just lay low. Unless, like you said, unless there is something that he needs to say that is my bad, my fault, or whatever, because a lot of people will respect that. If you actually come out and address and admit to where you failed or admit to where, then people can forgive. But if you just act like nothing's happened and then, of course, that truth does come out, then it looks a lot worse. So
yeah, as I say, if the smoking gun comes out and you don't say anything or you deny, and then the smoking gun comes out, that obviously looks way worse. I'll say this, Cole. I don't think right now he needs to say anything because we're in the era of. I mean, this has all happened. This is all broken within 48 hours. Within this
crazy.
is not. This is nothing is confirmed either. It's not like nothing is like solid news evidence. I mean, there's been talk, obviously.
It's just been one thing after the other. It's crazy.
I know. And when there's news reports, from Auburn reporters about them looking at, potentially moving on from Harsin, obviously it's something. But, it's, what are you supposed to do if you're Harsin? I mean, there's nothing you can say or do that will help your case.
It's not even football season. You're always getting criticized about things.
I think, and to Auburn, I mean, this is the worst possible timing. The worst timing to find a coach. We just had so many coaches, big names move. I mean, this past season, I mean, the biggest job openings, I think, simultaneously ever in college football history happened last year. And then you have all these big names still looking for jobs last year. But hey, they're mostly all gone.
They're all gone now.
This is not a time to look for a head coach. So the terrible timing. I don't think you say anything if you're Harsin. You just trudge along. Maybe in a week or two, you let it all, kind of everything kind of slide down a little bit. If you need to, if the school thinks you need to, if you think you need to do it for your players, if you need to, make yourself look a little bit better for, just the public eye and the college eye for recruits in the future, whatever that may be, looking forward. If you need to do that in a week or two, do it. I think that's a good move. I think you let it ride for a little bit, let's not address it within 48 hours, because you're probably going to say something stupid that they're just going to run off with and be like, hey, look, he mentioned this in the press conference. It's got to be true.
Last thing, and we'll move on. The hot seat has got to be there starting game 1 next year, of course. Stephen, if you had to say on a scale from 1 to 10, how hot is Bryan Harsin's seat as far as going into that football season next year, as far as if he does only get to, let's say, 6 or 7 wins again, how hot is that seat throughout the year?
So I think currently it's a 10 out of 10. If we're going games, I think you need to. I don't necessarily know if it's a win-loss, to be honest. I mean, obviously wins mean something. I think it's showing improvement, showing that you're doing something. Okay. You're moving.
So you're competitive in games, like against Alabama, Georgia.
You're competitive and you're moving the program in the right direction. Show us something offensively. You showed us defense, and maybe that was just David Mason last year. We don't know. We'll see this year if he stays. But let's show us something offensively that you're, is different. Show us that you can make. It looks like Zach Calzada is going to be the guy. Doesn't look like there's going to be any more transfers. There wasn't any recruits. So it looks like the Calzada is your guy. Show us if you can do something with him.
Because surely they're not going to stick with TJ Finley, right?
Right. So let's show us if you can do something. I think, to me, if I was an Auburn fan, that would be what I was looking for. Show me progression offensively. Show me that you can keep up with the defense that played so good last year, and let's get some recruits in. Let's get some transfers in. Let's do something to push this program in the right direction, because I think right now you're looking at something that can go very bad very quickly, and then it's going to be a job nobody wants. Who wants to step into the role where they say, hey, after 1 year, we're going to try and get you out if you're not our guy? Who wants that?
That is not a job that many coaches would take. That is going to be certainly a situation to keep an eye on, not only during the spring, but as it gets through the summer and the fall, as is, Stephen, a situation that we now have to just kind of flame the rivalry that has been built up over the last couple of seasons between Saban and Coach Fisher. So Jimbo Fisher made headlines with a statement. I can't even remember what this reporter asked Jimbo Fisher. I'm guessing it had something to do with the NIL, of course, because he gets going on, of course, about how supposedly there is a rumor that Texas A&M has kind of been shuffling the NIL in the faces of high school recruits to try and basically win them over, and which we all know is not how the NIL is supposed to be designed. It is supposed to be to help fund college players while they are in school, not to get them to come to the school. So obviously Nick Saban said last season about Bryce Young already bringing in, what was it, just $1 million in endorsements?
I think he said over $1 million. I think he said
over $1 million.
He's already got over $1 million.
So obviously Jimbo Fisher tried to drag Nick Saban into the mix by saying, well, if Nick Saban says it, everybody looks at it like it's okay. But as soon as somebody else says it, it's wrong. It's basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what Jimbo Fisher said. And then Nick Saban was very quick, not verbally, but through, I guess it was just a statement that some reporter got from him. But that basically, that is not that is not the case of what Nick Saban did with Bryce Young. So.
It's crazy. So I think that the first two kind of statements came, if you're like me and you have 16 billion ESPN notifications come through. I think the first two came through.
Mr. Adam Schefter himself over here.
I guess so. I'm Adam Schefter. Adam Schefter just has a direct line to my phone notifications. That's all it is. I think that the first one I got was Lane Kiffin talking about how he doesn't like how NIL is being used, that he thinks is a good system, but he thinks that it is the wild, wild west, that it is everybody for themselves. It's who's got the most money.
Was Lane Kiffin not the one did he call out kind of things that are going on with Texas A&M originally? Was that kind of what happened? Because he was talking about how the state of Texas, there's no
income tax or state income tax.
Yeah. The income. Wasn't he the one who originally kind of made this kind of statement relevant?
Yeah,
I can't remember if it was him or if there was some coach that said it, and this was what spurred, I think, Jimbo Fisher to make those kind of comments to defend it, because there has been a lot of people that's been scrutinized the fact that Texas A&M is the #1 recruiting class for that national sign day. Because they're saying because of the NIL, because they have all this money to shell out to these high school recruits.
They got that oil money.
They got the money.
They got the oil
exactly.
money.
Because everybody's sitting there. Well, because the point that everybody's trying to make is because how is Texas A&M, who's, I mean, let's face it, let's call it like it is, Stephen. I mean, they've been an 8 to 9 win team pretty much since they've been in the SEC.
4 or more losses in 8 of the last 9 seasons.
So what is the explanation for how you all of a sudden have this class after an 8-4 season where you didn't make an appearance in the bowl game either because of COVID issues? We get all that, but your program finally gets its staple win this year against Alabama in a game where, let's face it, we still can't explain how they won the game. And then somehow you just get this #1 recruiting class. And it's like, where did this come from? And so I think that can definitely raise some eyebrows. But Jimbo Fisher has proven that he can recruit with the big boys. It's not like Texas A&M necessarily came out of nowhere. But I get the scrutiny that they're putting under Texas A&M. And if there is some type of, I'm not sure how you monitor this NIL system. I said it from the beginning when they first introduced this was only going to make things harder for college football. It was not going to make it easier. Now you have essentially made it easier for people to get away with if these accusations are true towards Texas A&M. You've only enabled and made it easier for people to do this kind of things.
Yeah, so I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, I think that me and you both feel the same way about NIL and transfer portals. I'm assuming. I don't think we've talked about it, but I think they're both great in what they are, in what they allow college players to be able to do. They allow, players to move like coaches do, say, hey, this coach moved. I was recruited by this coach. Let me get out of the situation that I'm in. Or, we see it with players. We've seen it several times where players just aren't in the right situation for whatever reason. They go to another school.
Absolutely.
And they're booming, they're booming. So we obviously want that. It's just there needs to be a period of time like free agency in the NFL where this transfers happen. There's a transfer window. And then after that, there's no more transfers because people don't know. I was reading an article, I think today, the high school coaches don't know what to tell their kids or college coaches coming in because college coaches don't even know how many scholarships they have because they don't know if someone's going to transfer or not. They're still waiting on that transfer. And then, so we have that. And then we also have NIL just has to be regulated on a national scale because if it's not regulated, then you're going to have teams like Texas A&M who have all this oil money and have all these alumni who have all this money. They're going to say, hey, you see Saban saying that you can go play for him. I'm saying you can make $100,000 for me. And they're going to say, well, deal. And you can't even blame the college kid. It's $100,000. Duh, you're going to take that deal, So it's like there has to be some kind of regulation in, hey, NIL is not allowed in recruiting talks. You cannot tell them, they cannot have a deal until they're already committed, basically.
Exactly, 100%.
Or it's this amount of money is allowed to a player for recruiting. And that's it. And that's you're topped off.
But come on, Stephen. They'll find some way around. They'll find a loophole in that system too, as they always do. Come on now.
So I'll backtrack a little bit. So Lane Kiffin and Saban kind of said the same thing. They were both like, I like the transfer portal. I like the NIL. It's just the wild, wild west. There's no regulation. Everybody's taking advantage of it. And Saban,
it is.
It's completely.
And they're correct on those statements.
And Saban said, he's like, look, people will say, at least you're doing it over the table now. He's like, we never did that. I never did that. That never happened. Take it what you will. I think everybody, to a certain extent, even Alabama fans, are like, Maybe they paid. We don't know. We'll see. Whatever. Who cares? Never got found out. But I think that, I mean, they're completely right. And Jimbo, Jimbo. I don't know how he has a leg to stand on here to, I will say to his credit, he recruited 2 number 1 classes while he was at Florida State. So he's done this before.
Yes.
And one of them won a national championship. The problem is Texas A&M has never had this amount of talent. You're recruiting against all these other players. You're recruiting against all these other teams. This is the first year that NIL has really played a part in recruiting. This is the first year, because last year was kind of after all the big recruiting dates, right? The NIL kind of took place. This is the first year that NIL has been fully on for this recruiting cycle. I mean, I read an article today called that this is potentially, that ESPN writer is potentially calling this the best recruiting class ever. In other words, that you have so many 5-star.
Are you serious?
Now, this is not saying we obviously have to see the production, right? We don't know.
Right. Well, but like on paper, as far as the stars go.
On paper, because of the 5 stars, because of the defensive line, because of the athletes they have, this could potentially be
this is not counting the transfer portal either with Texas.
This is just
strictly high school recruits.
Strictly high school recruits. This is the best class ever, and I know there were several people saying it's the best defensive line class ever, no doubt, because of the amount of talent they have. I think they have the number 1 interior defensive lineman, the number 1 defensive end, the number 1 outside linebacker, like every part of the defensive line you can want. They have the number 1 overall recruit in that. So
I'm reading this right now on ESPN.com. You're right. Football Recruiting Roundtable is Texas A&M's class the best ever.
And credit.
Wow.
Credit to Jimbo. Take advantage of the Wild West while you can.
And this is a team that Stephen finished 5th in the West Division last year.
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. That's why I think Jimbo doesn't have.
I guess that's why there's some eyebrows that are being raised right now. I guess, huh? What's going on? What's in the water there at Texas A&M? What's
Jimbo
going on? I mean, now we did have LSU head coach Brian Kelly was dancing with a recruit that eventually flopped to Alabama somehow. We're not sure how that happened, but what was the player's name? I can't remember what his name is.
Oh gosh, it's
something Lewis. Was it something Lewis?
Hold on, I have it.
But he of course, it's been made into so many memes now. It's hilarious to watch now. But of course, Brian Kelly is dancing with this recruit, and it's just so cringy and awkward and just weird. And then a matter of weeks later, he commits to Alabama on signing. It's the wildest thing.
Danny Lewis.
Is he a tight end, right?
Yes, it is.
Yes, so the tight end.
Speaking of Brian Kelly, I want to bring up another Brian to you. That's pretty in the news right now.
Oh man, hey, good transition there, Steve.
Thank you. Hey, this is why we do this game, because we're good at transitions. Brian Flores in the NFL, so transition a little bit to some pro football, because that's where it looks like college football's headed anyways, is a pro football way. Brian Flores has made some serious accusations in the NFL. We got to talk about this. It happened, I think it was announced on Wednesday, maybe Tuesday, that he's suing the NFL.
Yes.
And he names 3 franchises, the Dolphins, the Giants, and the Broncos. And essentially, he called the Giants and the Broncos, or did he name another one after that, or was it just those 3?
I believe it was just those 3.
Before I announced it. So he essentially said the Giants and the Broncos were just interviewing him to check a box to get to the Rooney Rule.
The Rooney Rule. Right.
He essentially called him a little bit. There's some systemic racism going on in the NFL, is what he stated. And I think almost that's not the most shocking thing. That's obviously shocking. That's big news. But I think potentially could be bigger news that he states that Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, good name, Stephen, he offered $100,000 per loss to Brian Flores for the 2019 season to tank.
And that's what stuck out to me too. I think, look, we've had many, I guess, times where we've seen, maybe not many times, but of the last few years, we've seen some head coaches come out and kind of speak out towards the need of the hiring of Black coaches in the NFL. We've seen this. But I think the thing that stuck out most is when he accused the Dolphins of literally paying him to lose football games, to literally tank.
It's crazy.
That is something that sticks with you.
I will say that I think that before we move on from the racism really quick, I will say I think the Rooney Rule in theory is a good rule, right? In theory.
It is. No, 100%.
I just
agree.
don't think it really works in practice because a lot of teams who have their hierarchy in mind, so they say, hey, look, Brian Daboll, he's our guy. He's our guy. We got to go get him. I want him for the Giants. But that could be the Giants thinking. They're like, oh, we already know. Like, we already know. But because they already know, they still have to interview a coach of color because of the Rooney Rule. And so that ends up making the coach of, whoever that might, maybe it's Brian Flores, say, well, now they're just interviewing me for no reason because they already have their guy. This is just check a box. It doesn't really work that way. And of course,
and that should be the case because Brian Flores he's
a great
more
coach.
than qualified for the position, more than qualified to be head coach in this league.
Honestly, a great coach.
It shouldn't have to be a rule for him to get an interview and get a job because he should get a job because he is more than qualified.
I completely
100%.
agree. It almost makes you think if they took the rule away, what would that look like? Now, I don't want it. How would that work? Basically, would it make more white coaches, or would it give the opportunity for Black coaches to be able to interview with real merit? I guess.
Right.
And of course, before we move on from this, I got to talk about Bill Belichick text messages. All time blunder to be like congratulations and be like, oh crap, I meant to text Brian Daboll, not you. Wrong Brian.
I mean,
sorry
wow.
about that.
What an all-time hiccup, right?
Have you seen the this is a verbal meme, so it's really good for podcasting. Have you seen the meme of have you seen Parks and Rec?
I have, yes.
Yeah, so
that's one with Chris Pratt, right?
Yes. It's Ron getting his phone.
Ron Swanson.
Yes, and smashing it on because he thinks the government's watching. That's I think that's Bill Belichick after he sent that. He's just getting his phone and smashing it. He's like, look, I'm just never
smashing
using
it. Like,
no
oh
technology.
my God, how do I make this mistake? How do I do that?
No more technology. He's like, you know what? We're going old school. I'm sending a messenger pigeon.
Which you wouldn't think Bill Belichick was really texting anybody. Anyways, you think Bill Belichick uses like a walkie-talkie phone or something like that to like communicate with people, right?
Bill Belichick from now on is using messenger pigeons. Nothing else. Messenger pigeons or nothing. That way there's no, he's good. He's good.
But now going back to the Brian Flores talk, though, I would like to say this because it was rumored that the Saints. I don't know if this for sure happened, but there was a report that the Saints did meet with Brian Flores to interview him in Mobile at the Pro Bowl. Right. I believe on Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday one.
Right.
And my thing is if I'm a Saints fan, first of all, I think that's a steal because I think the Dolphins were stupid in the first part to even let go of this guy. I think that Brian Flores, because he's cut from the Bill Belichick tree, correct?
Yeah, he is.
That's what I'm saying. This guy. Yes. So that's what I'm saying. I didn't know why you want to move off him anyways. And let me just say this: if it isn't true, in fact, that he was paid to try, or they were trying to bribe him to lose games, man, shame on the Dolphins organization because that's an all-time low, and that's a very respected organization and franchise. And I'd be very disappointed. It's Stephen Ross. Is that what you said?
That's the owner's name. Yeah, Stephen Ross.
Man,
so not only is this implications obviously for the competitive nature of the NFL, because you have teams trying to win or lose, trying to win their division, trying to make the playoffs, trying to do whatever. So this has effects on hundreds of maybe thousands of people in the NFL franchises making millions of dollars. It also has, you got to look at the betting aspect because betting is so huge in the NFL now. I think Stephen Ross is even involved in a betting company.
That's a lot of legal stuff that you're messing with.
That's what I'm saying. So the SEC could even get involved. This couldn't even be. This may not even be just an NFL thing. It could be a federal law thing, and so that's crazy as well. And then also, I think it's so hard if you're an NFL franchise to get an owner out basically. So let's use what's the the Commanders owner. What is his name?
Oh my gosh.
Dan something.
Dan Snyder, is that his name?
Dan Snyder. So a lot of allegations.
It actually took me a second, Stephen, for me to realize the Commanders. I'm so used to them being called the Washington football team. So when you said Commanders, it actually did. So in case anybody didn't know this, let's just go ahead and break that. The Washington football team is now the Washington Commanders. For anybody who didn't know that, they are the Commanders now. So they actually have a name.
You know what's crazy? So I heard they might be handing out towels. You know what they would call them?
Mm-mm.
Got to be the cum towels, right?
My gosh. You're so bad.
I
You're
mean,
so bad.
what's short? They're the commies, man, right? They're the
Oh
commies.
my gosh.
They're the
Okay.
commies.
All right.
All right,
Back
that's
to your
enough.
point.
Enough
Back to your
jokes.
point.
It's so
Good
hard to get an owner.
Lord.
So he's
You're
got
trying to get us
obviously.
canceled already, Steve. We're just trying to get under review, and you're just already trying to get us canceled here in 2022.
It's
Come
too
on.
good. It's too good. They threw. You can't lob it up to me and not just dunk on them like
I know.
that. You know
I kind of slow pitch softball.
yeah,
that one,
exactly. Anyways, Dan Snyder obviously got these allegations against him. Probably not a good guy from what a lot of people are, a lot of stuff out there. It would be almost impossible to get him to sell the team, like get him out as an owner, right? Even with all these terrible things he's done. I think what Stephen Ross did, if this is true, if this all turns out to be true, that could be the one thing that could get an owner out, could get another person to buy the Dolphins, could move that franchise.
Broncos just recently went up for sale, correct? They're up for sale right now for about, I think somebody said $4 billion. I mean, I think the report was $4 billion.
Crazy. Yeah, because I think that there's an owner in Utah, I think, or not an owner, but a billionaire he's got to be a billionaire in Utah that could potentially buy the Broncos. And that would be the first black owner of a franchise.
Oh wow, that's awesome. Wow.
Yeah, I read that this was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, so it could have changed by now, but that's the last thing I read about that. But yeah, so could be very interesting to see how that moves along. I think
before we move on, Stephen, I just want to ask you, so if is there any head coach currently right now that you just think would be desperate enough? Because right now there's just no way that these good head coaches are going to touch that Dolphins job with all these allegations out there. Is there any way that if you're a head coach like an Eric Bieniemy, if you're you're starting to run out of candidates at this point, but I mean, who potentially would be gaining anything from taking that job? I mean, is there a guy out there? I mean, would you want to take that job right now? Would you want to be that next guy to follow Brian Flores? I mean,
as I say, it's so hard too because obviously Brian Flores and Stephen Ross really never got along. Stephen Ross also alleged that he wanted to, Brian Flores also alleged that Stephen Ross wanted him to meet with the player, a quarterback, a very good quarterback, which I think we can all assume that's Deshaun Watson at the time, to meet with him and to try to lure him to the Dolphins, which of course is against NFL rules. So they would both get fined. Stephen Ross tried to get him to do that multiple times. He said he invited him on his yacht. And then by the time they went somewhere, it turned out they had a meeting set up with the said quarterback. He never named names. I'm just assuming with all the Deshaun Watson talk that it was Deshaun Watson is who that was. So I don't know. With all the allegations going on right now, with Stephen Ross still being the owner, with uncertainty everywhere, golly, it's hard to think that you would want a head coach, especially if you're a coach in a successful position, which is who is up for head coaching jobs. It's hard to believe you would want to step into that away from your success and your comfy job you have right now, even if it's higher pay, because you could potentially go into a situation where everything crumbles. So yeah. I honestly don't believe that anything will happen unless they just go get somebody out of the blue. Like, I don't even know who they're going to get coached this year, because I don't think that this legal situation is going to play out. I mean, it might be 2 years before we see this play out. It's a legal situation. We know how the courts work. I mean, Deshaun Watson didn't play at all last year, and we're no closer to figuring out if those 23 allegations or however many there are true or not. So, like, what, these legal situations take forever to play out, and that's what this is right now. It's a lawsuit. So I don't even know who the Dolphins are going to get for next year, let alone in the future. Who are they going to have coaching there? Is Stephen Ross just going to be like, owner coach?
Yeah,
owner coach GM. Me.
It's definitely something that we're going to try and keep an eye on, obviously, moving forward. And as far as Brian Flores, hopefully he lands a job. I mean, I think that it was very untimely, him accusing and making these allegations right before he gets the interview with the Saints. So now we'll see what happens. Does he have to go to court with this? I mean, what kind of legal trouble is he going to try and bring, to try and get on his side as far as coming forward And I mean, how does that affect as far as somebody taking him, as far as bringing him in as their head coach? Personally, as a Saints fan, I would welcome Brian Flores with open arms. But that's
I agree. I think he's a great coach. I think he has coached a lot of really bad teams in Miami and gotten them to some wins they shouldn't have won.
Absolutely.
But
100%.
I think that right now, if you're a team, you don't really want to get involved. I think if you're an owner of a team or a GM of a team,
I think it's hard.
I don't, and Flores stated himself, he's like, look, this is probably going to keep me from getting an NFL coaching job, at least for a long time. Maybe eventually I could if this all turns out to be true.
And I think that speaks, I think what you just said there, Stephen, I think that speaks to how passionate and how probably true some of these allegations have to be. If someone's willing to sacrifice, because Brian Flores, like we keep saying, this guy's a good NFL head coach and he belongs in the NFL as a head coach. If he's willing to sacrifice getting a job like he is, there has to be some kind of truth to what he's accusing of. Hey, I'm just saying, has to be.
Like we talked about with Bryan Harsin, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Where there is smoke, there is fire. We will leave it at that. Hey, outside of football, there is some big basketball going on. There was some that happened over the weekend and happened during this week. Stephen, of course, the Iron Ball round 2 happened on Tuesday night. Alabama just got so close in the second half, made it 57-55. And then Auburn, of course, went on another huge run in the second half to kind of create some distance and dropped 100 on the Crimson Tide. Only, I think, the second time a Nate Oates coach team has ever allowed 100 points scored. Cole,
what's your reaction, Stephen? So we talked about last week. Go follow us on TikTok if you haven't, because we put out a video of it recapping Alabama's problems.
Yep.
And we saw them play Saturday. We saw them beat Baylor, obviously huge win in Coleman. And then we see them kind of revert back to a little bit of the old ways against Auburn. You saw in that first part of the first half, it was crazy because first part of the first half looked like Auburn was going to win by 50. And then you get to about the last 5 minutes of the first half, Bama starts hitting threes. Auburn gets a little sloppy with it. They think they have the lead. They're kind of coasting a little bit. Bama's hitting threes back to back to back to back. They cut it down to 12, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was like 30 at one point. So they cut it down to 12. Auburn gets fouled with a second left. They hit 2 free throws. It's 14 going into halftime, which, believe it or not, is a huge win for Alabama going to halftime because, again, Auburn looked like they were going to win by 50 or 60 points.
Oh, my goodness,
They go into the beginning of the second half. Alabama, starting with Quinterly. Quinterly couldn't miss. Shackelford couldn't miss. They were they were hitting shots. They were defending well. They were swinging. They were moving the ball offensively.
And then there was a stoppage of play there, I think, Stephen. You're talking. I think I know where you're going with this. After they cut that lead to 57-55, there was a little bit of a scuffle that happened between the two teams. The officials kind of broke things up. They kind of went their separate ways. And it felt like kind of the momentum that Alabama had, they built up, kind of died. And Auburn fans, and obviously it's hard to win in Auburn Arena, but that home crowd advantage, they hyped that team up and they went right back on a run.
John Rothstein says it, the CBS basketball analyst, I'm welcome to the jungle. The Auburn Arena, the way they have it set up, I will say that Auburn Arena, the one downside is that there's only about 8,000 tickets or so. So it's about like $700 if you want to get in the lower section. Not cheap, but the way they have it set up with the student section, it is so loud, so impossible because the whole lower bowl, it's really only one bowl. It's not even an upper bowl. The whole thing.
Yeah, there's really not a upper level of the stadium. It's literally just all down on the court.
It is Auburn students too, from one side to the other. So it's crazy. Credit to Auburn. Wendell Green was hitting shot after shot, deep threes. Of course, Auburn's defense is what sets them apart. Walker Kessler, having him to anchor that defense is almost unfair. I think I texted you during the game. It's like every mistake that Auburn has, it's kind of like Herb Jones we talked about for Alabama last year.
He's the biggest eraser of all time.
He erases everything. He helps everything, And then, of course, having Jabari Smith, who's 6'10" and super athletic, is on defense as well, because I even heard during the game one of the broadcasters was saying that Jabari Smith says when he plays his best is when he's trying his best on defense. When he's playing his hardest on defense is when he's at his best in basketball.
Because he's the total package.
And Auburn offensively, they scored 100. Obviously, they're hitting shots, but I will say what you will about their offense. Their defense Watching that Alabama
That's
game,
where they win their games. Yes.
I think that their
I
defense,
agree.
honestly, right now, if we're talking about right this second, I think that can win the national championship. I think they have right this second. I think they have the best defense in the country. And the old saying goes, defense wins championships. But let's move on from that and let's talk about the upcoming games, because I want to touch on the upcoming games before we end this our little our Zoom. You're
Our
right
little
here.
Zoom call.
I'm looking up, but you're actually right here. You're actually right here. Auburn doesn't have a big test. They get kind of an easy game coming up with Georgia. I think everybody expects that to be an easy win. Their only SEC win is coincidentally against Alabama. And then, of course, we have Alabama coming up, and they're playing Kentucky. Huge game at Coleman again. So we'll see if Alabama continues their roller coaster and they continue. Maybe they can come up and they can beat Kentucky and have another huge win in their belt, in their repertoire, or will they revert to their old ways against Auburn? What do you think, Cole?
Well, I'll touch briefly on what about Auburn in their upcoming games. So Auburn in the next stretch, they are at Georgia, they're at Arkansas, and then they're back home against Texas A&M. And let me just say, a loss is coming for this Auburn team because it's just hard to win 20 or so games in a row. And I don't, and personally, I think if you ask Bruce Pearl, he probably would tell you that a loss might be good for them before they get to tournament play, because you're going to have your bad games, obviously. But I will say this for Auburn. A lot of their big wins have been at home at Auburn. And sometimes the whistle is not going to favor you as much at home versus on the road. So we'll see what happens when this Auburn team goes to Arkansas and goes to Tennessee and goes to Mississippi State and Florida and whatnot, and see how they respond when they're not at the mercy of their own home crowd. And sometimes the whistle, I mean, we can kind of tell, Stephen. I mean, let's not all act like we're blind witnesses here. We know that the home team typically gets the nod, especially when it comes to the officiating sometimes. So I think Auburn definitely, like all the things you said, they're definitely the best team in the country. And I think that they definitely have the best defense as far as with Walker Kessler and Jabari Smith. Cartwell definitely gives them an edge on the defensive side. Zeb Jasper, definitely a good three-point shooter to back up Wendell Green, who I think is also going to be maybe a first or second round pick in the NBA draft, followed by Jabari Smith and Walker Kessler. And it all starts with their defense. You're right, because it enables them to get out in transition and get those open threes and get those wide open alley-oops after they get some big defensive stops. But what happens to them when they go outside of Auburn? Because you're not going to play the SEC tournament and the NCAA tournament in Auburn Arena. So before I crown them the national champion, I guess what I'm trying to say is let me see them play some big games outside of their home turf and see how they respond, because some of the road games they had, I mean, we talk about the at Missouri game. I mean, 55-54, Stephen. I mean, that's a close game. Ole Miss had Auburn on the ropes on the road. I mean, that's not a great Ole Miss team by no stretch of the means. So, I mean, how do they play on the road and outside of Auburn Arena? That's what concerns me, is because you don't have to convince me they're the best team at home. They are. That is the best team. You're going to be hard pressed to find me a way to believe that they're going to lose at Auburn Arena. But what happens in those three games? And that I'm circling that game at Arkansas, because I think this Hogs team is actually a pretty good SEC team, and they bring it at home as well. So we'll find out what Jabari Smith and this Bruce Pearl team, if they can win. How many games are left, Stephen? Like, would you say like
7,
10, maybe 7, something like that? I would be surprised if Auburn only loses about 1 or 2 games to finish the season. If that's the case, I mean, we'll see how they finish. But you're right. I think this is definitely a Final Four team. But I do think that a healthy Kentucky team, and that leads me into my talk about Alabama coming up on Saturday. With Ty Washington and of course Wheeler both healthy for this Saturday, it's going to be tough for Alabama to muster up a win against them. And I've never felt a game that might be must win, but Stephen, this might be must win, because if you look at Alabama's schedule coming up, I mean, where are the wins going to come from? I mean,
I don't know. I don't know, Cole, to be honest. And
you're looking.
You didn't even mention Sheboyh for Kentucky, which we talked about. We harped on.
Oh, I'm just talking about guys that weren't healthy against Auburn. Is what I'm trying to say.
I know,
but you have the big man, of course, the double machine for
How is
Kentucky, of course.
Alabama going to stop him from getting all these
You're
offensive
not.
rebounds?
That's how, Stephen. They're not going to. They don't have an interior guy that is able to match up with him. There's just not a guy.
Alabama
don't have that guy.
Alabama obviously has Kentucky. It's big for their tournament hopes. They have
and you have them twice. Right. You have them twice in the span of 5 games, Steven.
They do. They play Kentucky at home, at Ole Miss, Arkansas at home, Mississippi State at home, at Kentucky again. Then you have.
You don't have a break till Vanderbilt and South Carolina, Stephen. Your next 5 games are.
They're tough.
Those are tough games.
They're all tough, and right now I think Lenardi has them as a 5 seed right now in the tournament.
Wow, obviously. Really a 5 seed? Wow.
They've stuck there. They've stuck there for a while, and I think it's because they have those
wins, those early resume wins. Yes,
and they beat Baylor. It's like they're a roller coaster, like we've talked about, Cole. I mean, they play up to their competition. They really do, and we saw that. There was about a 10-minute section, the last 5 minutes of the first half and the first 5 minutes of the second half, where you would have thought Alabama was one of the best teams ever, because the way they were defending, the way they were hitting shots, the way they were, playing the type of ball that Nate Oates wants them to play is when they're at their best. So let's talk about the final team in our home state, UAB. I think that we're both, we can talk about Alabama being a roller coaster, Auburn being the number 1 team in the country, but I think at heart we're both truly rooting for UAB to make the tournament and make a splash.
Absolutely, 100%.
So UAB, obviously a very tough loss. I think I talked about it, Marshall, and I was dumb to talk about it, to be honest. Marshall's not a good team. They're not. I don't know what I was thinking.
You jinxed them, Steven. You jinxed them.
I don't know what I was thinking, because I said Marshall's going to be a tough game, but they shouldn't have been. Marshall, without their best player, defeats UAB at home.
It had a substantial lead in the first half. I mean, it was a very UAB was very reluctant to cut this to a deficit that they had at one point.
I will say, Cole, I did hear from Andy Kennedy that they were stuck on the plane coming in for like 6 hours. That their 2 pilots got, because of ice, and then their 2 pilots got COVID. So I think they had a very tough kind of transition into Marshall getting there and everything like that. So I think maybe that played a little bit part of it. They were just not ready to play from that whole transition into the kind of getting there to play. So maybe that had a little bit to do with it, a little bit of hecticness coming in. But yeah, it didn't look like the UAB team we've seen. They
certainly not.
Shots.
No.
Their defense, their missing defensive assignments was what really poked out to me in that game. And then obviously they have a huge game coming up here Saturday, Middle Tennessee State. Are they at Middle Tennessee State or is it at home?
It's at home. This is the Bartow Classic, actually.
Huge game. Andy Kennedy has talked about it. Bartow, they've won a lot with AK. They won a lot of games in Bartow. So let's see if they can keep it up. And then obviously, of course, they have, I think they still play, do they still play Western Kentucky? I know they played North Texas, and then they have La Tech as well.
So they actually already played their 1 game against Western Kentucky, but they will have to play North Texas one more time and Louisiana Tech. You look on UAB's schedule, Stephen. I mean, seriously, if you, because at one point we were talking about, I mean, there was experts that were talking about this too. This is not just me and you just spitballing either as UAB alumni. There was real talk that even if UAB didn't win the Conference USA tournament, that at one time that they might get an at-large bid.
Well, Lenardi still has them as their last 4 out.
And I agree. And I get that. I'm with him on this. But here's the problem. If you drop any more games like you did on Saturday against Marshall, that's going to eliminate that at-large bid.
Well, I think that honestly right now it's eliminated for all intents and purposes. I think it's eliminated. You killed yourself. You lost to Rice. You lost to a Marshall.
You lost to Marshall. Two bad Conference USA teams. They're not good. They're not good teams.
West Virginia is looking down year, and they lost to West Virginia by 5, I think. And then you lose to South Carolina by 2.
Looking like a down year for them as well. Not looking like a good win.
You lose to, I think, San Francisco. Was it San Francisco or St. Louis? They lose 2 by 2.
It's San Francisco. They beat St. Louis, but they lost San Francisco. Yeah.
So you have those losses where it would look really good on your resume if you beat them, even if they're having a down year. They're name enough to be like, okay, well at least they beat them, in Power 5. But yeah, it's I think UAB lost their at-large.
Let me just tell you, Stephen. Look at this schedule. Let me just tell you. Because the 3 toughest games they have at home, and we know the tournament committee, they value home losses, because they don't want you to lose at home. They want you to defend your home court. If you lose on the road, they're more forgiving. But you can't. This game against Middle Tennessee State, North Texas, Lost Tech, they're all at home. And then all these other necessarily bad Conference USA teams, they're on the road. For UAB, I don't think you can drop some more of those. If you want to keep it that last 4 in, but I don't even know if you can bank on that at this point. Like you said, you might have to just go ahead and assume, look, guys, we're going to have to win out. Go ahead and win the Conference USA tournament. We're going to have to.
I think that if you're AK, if you're, that team, you have to tell them, like, look, we're not getting the at-large. This is a win or go home for that tournament. I think that's what you need to preach going into it. And this is winner. This is where the men for boys right here, right? You've been picked to win the conference. You've been picked to win the conference all season. You've played some great basketball. You look like one of the best mid majors. I mean, you've been top 10 in the mid majors list. Let's see what you can do from here, and let's see us make a tournament appearance. See if you can make a splash, win the first game, do something like that. Go back to 2014 when they did it last time. Let's do something like that and really make a splash here and get AK some momentum in the recruiting and the transfer portal. Obviously, most of these players right now are transfers. So let's see if he can, keep it up with that and then get some success.
So before I let you go, Stephen. Let's just go next game and maybe the next few games for Alabama, Auburn, and UAB. I'll just walk you through them. We did this last show, kind of their next 3 games as far as, because I made the prediction. I said 1 of the 3 for Alabama. And hey, look, they got the Baylor win. So hey, look, there you go. So maybe they still get the Kentucky win. They get 2 for 3. Who knows? So looking at Auburn, like I said, they have Georgia, they have Arkansas, and then Mississippi State, I believe.
And they're at Arkansas.
They're at Arkansas. That is their only road game of the 3 games. Well, no, the Georgia game's on the road as well. I'm sorry. So at Georgia, at Arkansas. I'm sorry, at home against Texas A&M. So those next 3 games, do you see a 3-0 sweep?
Cool.
That would extend the win streak to, what is it now? Is it 18 games?
I was going to say 18 or 18. Yeah. Cole, with the points you made earlier, I think a 2-1 stretch. I really do, and I think that could come at Texas. I don't think it's going to come to Georgia.
I don't think anybody thinks it's going to come against Georgia.
You made good points about the road team versus the home team Auburn is. I would pick the Arkansas game if I was a betting man. Maybe Texas A&M. Texas A&M has a good team this year. So let's see there. And then I think Alabama has what? They have Kentucky, then Mississippi State, or is it Ole Miss?
I think you're right. I think it's Ole Miss. I'm pulling up it right now. It is Kentucky at Ole Miss, and then they play Arkansas at home.
Gotcha. I mean, for Alabama's stakes in the tournament, I would say they need to go 2-3 in those next 3 games at least.
I would think so too.
So I mean,
especially if you drop that game against Kentucky tomorrow,
you really need to beat Arkansas. You really need to beat Ole Miss. So I would say 2-3, and then I've been high on UAB all year. There's no reason. So they have Southern Miss at Old Dominion, or Middle Tennessee this Saturday. Southern Miss at home, and then Old Dominion on the road. There's no reason they shouldn't go 3-0. I think UAB is far and away the best Conference USA team. I think you can point to maybe Lost Tech, maybe North Texas. I think North Texas is one of the top 10 mid majors right now, but I think UAB is the most talented. There's no reason they shouldn't.
I agree with everything you said. 2 out of 3 for Alabama. I think that's the best you can hope for. And for Auburn, 2-1. I think that would be a good record for them as well. Even if that is a loss at Arkansas, I think even Bruce Pearl would say, "Hey, we'll take it." I think, of course for UAB as well. Oh yeah, no, a humble game for sure. I think Bruce Pearl would be totally fine with that. And for UAB, you're right. There's really no excuse. 3 out of the next 3, you should win. There's really no excuse as to why UAB should lose. You're right. So. Absolutely.
Well, I think that will wrap it up for this Zoom show. So maybe we'll do more of these in the future. Who knows? Maybe we'll get some better mics and do some more of these in the future and get some more maybe quick hitters in there too. So maybe
I love it.
More content for the people, Cole. More content for the people. If you haven't already, go subscribe to our YouTube. Go listen to us on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow us on TikTok. We're making those now. We're there. eventually I'll get Cole.
And make sure everybody knows. Tune in next week we're gonna have a full Super Bowl breakdown next week.
Yes.
We'll come to you guys live, and we'll make sure we get everything going to you guys.
Well, we'll also break down the games from last weekend. We didn't really have time for this one, but we'll break down those games just briefly. We'll go into who we think will win and why. Full Super Bowl breakdown, and then whatever news breaks else, we'll see.
We'll wait and see.
But yeah, go follow us on all social media, Under Review 24/7, everywhere you find us, Under Review Pod, and we will see you guys next week.